Let me go first again. The first question from the honourable member. What do we do to increase the decline? And I think that's what I was trying to get at the end of my presentation, was about asking specific questions. And I think maybe to be a bit more detailed, it's about to look at those particular places which have very high levels of firearm violence. And if we're going to do something immediate in the short to medium term, I think there's issues around and these comments about social drivers of crime, and yes, we have some understandings of that. That's going to take decades to deal with, and there are actually other government departments that need to be kicking in to deal with those particular aspects. But on the issue of the short to medium term would be focus on the areas which have the highest level of firearm violence, and I think the police do know what the hotspots policing precincts are, have focused policing operations looking at collecting and confiscating illegal firearms in those particular areas, and you would probably see a net result from that if you wanted fairly quick gains. And I think that's been happening in many respects, but I think it goes back to Satunya and operations before that and afterwards had an impact. We just haven't been able to study the outcomes in a kind of an ineffective way. On the lottery system, and this is the one, and it's fairly unique to Botswana, is, I mean, I understand every year those who want to apply for a firearm license apply for one. This includes government officials, even police. If you want a personal firearm in the Botswana police, you have to apply for a license in the lottery system. You put your application in, they draw out 200 for hunting rifles, 200 for shotguns, and then they do a background check on you. And if you don't qualify, then you don't get your license. So, you know, there's kind of these kind of checks that go into place. So it's that's the system they've been using. It's very difficult to determine what impact it's had, but it seems to work for Botswana. There's been no, I mean, I know the hunting industry has raised concerns about it because it does affect tourism, but I think some arrangements are made when the need arises. Then background checks, are they significantly done? I mean, I think the question has been answered here. I mean, South Africa has probably some of the most rigorous requirements in terms of background checks if we were to follow the letter of the law and the regulations about interviews, assessments, because most countries would really just do a kind of criminal background check and find out, you know, do you have a criminal record, or were you admitted to a psychiatric hospital at some point, where the South African police are supposed to do a round of interviews, which is a time-consuming process, but I think when effectively done, and the point has been raised, can really make a major difference in terms of making sure that individuals who shouldn't have firearms don't get them. And just on some kind of anecdotal remarks that have come out of some studies around youth violence and gangs that I've been involved in, where, you know, youngsters on the low down on the criminal food chain have sort of indicated that they don't use guns because they can't get guns. It's more difficult to get access to illegal guns these days than it was 10 years ago, for example. But very difficult. And this comes to this kind of question about understanding the nature of, we need to be able to understand the nature of the illegal firearm economy. And we don't really understand it. We have kind of estimates. I mean, the police estimates in the sort of late 1990s there was around 500,000 firearms out there. We do know at one particular point in time that there were more than 20,000 firearms that were being lost or stolen each year. Those numbers have come down in recent years, but we really don't have a particularly clear picture of how the illegal economy works, how gangsters and criminal groups that are involved in home invasions, how they actually acquire their firearms. I think police probably have some intelligence on this because they would recover weapons that have been involved in the commission of crime. Sometimes they have serial numbers on, sometimes they don't. But the one thing we do, the dynamic that we know is most interpersonal violence and not violence that relates to robbing of banks or acid in transit vehicles. So most kind of where people are murdered on the streets or in their homes is largely handguns. And the question is, where do those handguns come from? Initially, there was speculation in sort of the 90s that they were coming across the borders, but from what could be, you know, a reflection on that, most of the guns that were coming from or available in Mozambique and Angola, where civil wars had been taking place, were actually automatic rifles. And the evidence that was produced in the late 90s was predominantly handguns. So the issue here is we do really need to get a good understanding of which guns are used in crime, and if possible, where do these guns come from? And I think that's a key question to be answered. What else do we have here? Let me leave it at that.